Hello and welcome to today's video. So this time we're going to be taking our first look at the brilliant James Bond book club editions. Now I've pulled together a complete set of these over the last few months. I already had a few, but I filled in all the sort of the missing gaps. And in this video, all we're going to be doing is cleaning them and getting them really nice and presentable. I'm going to put some brand new plastic wrappers on them as well, clean all the edges and get them just looking tip-top, ready to be part of my collection. I'm going to do a follow-up video where I look at the actual cover artist, the print runs and things like that in about a month or so's time. But this one's just going to be a cleaning video. So there's two versions of it. There's the narration free, just the sort of the ASMR cleaning sounds video of me just actually doing the work. And then I shall release another one, same length, same footage, but with me just explaining exactly what I'm doing. All right, so whichever version you're watching, sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay then, so we'll start off with Thunderball. So these weren't in any particular order, they were just sort of as they came to hand. One of the first things you'll notice about these book club editions is, as a general rule, the dust jackets are printed on quite thick paper, thicker than, say, an ordinary hardback. And for that reason alone, on the whole, I've found that they have been protected quite well over the years. Obviously that doesn't stop the spines getting faded, which is definitely an issue with some of the books. But as a general rule, they've survived okay. Out of the entire series, I think Goldfinger, For Your Eyes Only, and Dr. No are quite tricky to pick up in nice nick with decent wrappers, and Live and Let Die to have one with a nice white clear spine, which is mine certainly hasn't, and you'll see that later on in the video. I think it's actually the very last one that I clean up. But I really, over the last it's taken me about, I had a couple of the book club editions anyway that I'd had literally since I was a teenager. A couple that I had sadly had disappeared, so I definitely had Diamonds Are Forever, but in the end that was the last one I had to track down to finish my set, so I don't know, I must have got rid of that over the years somehow. But I had a couple already, and there is only like 11 to get in the set, plus a couple of sort of the spin-offs, so it really is quite a cheap way to put together a run of James Bond hardbacks without spending a fortune like you might do with the Cape books. Here on this copy of Thunderball, I'm just using a soft bristle toothbrush, one that I've had for probably a couple of years, and it is looking a little bit worse for wear, but I just use the toothbrush to get bits of dust and dirt that I might have got in the little in the nooks and crannies inside the book, and then along the top edges where dust has accumulated. It's worth bearing in mind that in a lot of cases these books are now 60 years old or more. So in that time, if they've just been sat on a bookcase, they're bound to have gathered a layer of dust. It's inevitable. And for that reason alone, I like to, when new editions come into my collection, I like to have a little cleaning session and get them as good as possible before they sort of join my main collection. Yeah, so once I've done all the inside there, I'm just going to use this soft toothbrush along the top edge. And there you go, look at the dust that popped out there. It's quite incredible. Definitely worth doing. If you've got very, very old books, I suggest doing it outside, to be honest. I did pick up a big collection of vintage paperbacks last summer. There was about 1,500 in there, and there was a box of 1930s Collins Crime Club paperbacks, and they were fantastic. A lot of them were in their wrappers right back to the very first one, but the dust must have been 70, 80 years old from when they were published. They'd never been sort of cleaned. and it was so bad I had to basically just do it outside. It was, you know, I would have been black with soot and dust and dirt over the years. They were, of course, from a period when most people had a coal fire, and that causes a layer of dust and soot to accumulate on the tops of books. These are a little bit later, of course, you know, mid to late 50s into the mid 60s, but even so, you know, they do accumulate, depending on where they've been stored, they do accumulate a bit of wear, dust and things like that, and that's why I do this process, and they do, generally speaking, come up really nicely. But even the Mintis books have sometimes got work that needs doing in them. So From Russia with Love was one which I had a little bit of an issue finding a nice copy of. So this is actually the second one I bought. The first one I did stick back onto eBay and got exactly what I paid for it. I think it was £25. This one I got for that similar money off ABE Books. Very nice copy, this one. It's got a little bit of foxing, as you can see there on the reverse of the dust wrapper. And there is some foxing on the page edges. I believe this one, the cast-offs from Jonathan Cape, the actual text blocks in part of the print one, were actually reused in this book club edition. And they used the original jacket as well. So, as I said, for £25–30 you can pick up a book which, in effect, doesn't look a million miles away from what the original first edition looks like. This particular copy has got some page edge foxing, sometimes called page edge browning, but this is more spotting, isn't it? Foxing. And I'm just flipping through the pages here, just to see if there's any that have been turned over. And then we'll do the top edge again. Not too bad dust-wise, just yeah, it has got that bit of edge foxing, but I can live with that. It's probably been stored in a slightly damp environment, and that's what's caused it. Cleaning the rails there. But you know, this has come from another dealer, so it wasn't too bad. And as I said, it really is a way to get a run of James Bond in hardback at a very reasonable price. If you do put a run of these together, I suppose the only detracting factor is they didn't release them all. So there's no Casino Royale, Moonraker, or Octopussy and the Living Daylights. They didn't come out in a book club hardback, which is a real shame, because it would have been a fantastic alternative set to get them. I wonder why. I wonder what the reason was. I suppose Octopussy and Living Daylights had such a huge print run. There were still copies around for years after publication, but not so much Casino Royale and Moonraker. Maybe it was just a little bit early. Maybe Bond wasn't quite, or Fleming wasn't quite as established to be picked up on the list. Who can tell? But then there would have been no reason for them to go back afterwards and not do it retrospectively, I suppose. Now, as you can see, the top edge of Goldfinger here is quite chipped, and I did think long and hard about razoring the very top off this just to get it a straighter edge, but I decided against it. I don't really like doing that, particularly on an original dust wrapper like this. I don't particularly like trimming if I can help it, so I tend not to do it, but I got to admit I did think about it in this particular instance, but yeah, decided against it. It's a nice interesting wrapper, this one, and when you do see the copies, the gold tends to be quite worn on the spine. Looks like quite a nice solid copy of the actual book. Little page edge browning, but can't really see much signs of spotting on this one. Yeah, just a couple of little odd marks here and there. Nothing to worry about. Yeah, I'd be quite happy with that copy. Yep, nice yellow boards. It's quite straight. It's not. It doesn't look like it's been read that often. And not a lot of dust coming off the top either. Yeah, not too bad at all, that one. I try and do my cleaning videos on a black base, and the reason why is because sometimes you just can't believe the amount of sort of dirt and bits of grime that get generated from doing, say, even a pile of paperbacks. It's quite amazing sometimes what comes out of them. So this is, I would say, the hardest one to get out of the entire range, Diamonds Are Forever. And I think it's mainly because it only had a small print run, 29,000 is what's been reported, which is a lot less than most of them where they were, 100,000 plus. I saw a few copies of this when I started collecting the book club editions, and then sort of late last year, sort of around November, I was looking in earnest on eBay and Abe, and I just couldn't see a copy anywhere. So I did reach out to a fellow Bond friend of mine who's a big Bond collector, David Stevens, who I've known for years, and he said, well, look, I've got a few people I know, let me put my feelers out, see if anyone's got one. And I was put in contact with a chap called Chris, who is part of the James Bond Ian Fleming book group on Facebook, which I didn't really even know much about, I have to say. And he had a couple of spare copies, and he did offer me one, which I almost bought, in fact. But on reflection, when I had a look at it, the quality was just a bit too low that I was in the end going to have to go and buy a new copy, just because it just wasn't good enough for me to keep. So I thought, no, I'll just bide my time and wait for a better one to come up. And lo and behold, about a week later it did, and I was able to grab this one, which you see in front of you. So it's got this small sort of, it looks like paint in the top right corner. But apart from that, it's a pretty solid copy, all things considered, of what is definitely the hardest one to get your hands on. All my efforts here, I tried to scrape it off, it wasn't having it, and I put a very damp cloth with a tiny bit of just water on, it wasn't having it. I didn't want to overdo it, because it is a delicate wrapper at the end of the day, and I'm quite happy to have it. The spine's pretty decent, so I'll be happy to have that one on my shelf. Once again, duplicating the original cape jacket. And this is one of the ones, ironically, that I had as a kid growing up, and seems to have you know, I got lost over the years. You know, I don't remember what condition mine was in, but I always remember it because it had the same jacket as the first edition. But there you go. It's fine. Certainly, though, it's the toughest one of them all. And if you're looking to get them, don't leave that one to the end, because it'll be quite a frustration. So this one's got like a book plate inside. It's like a previous owner's plate, like an ex-library, but it's not actually been filled in. It's just got like the plate mounted. I haven't tried to remove that. A little bit of light foxing and page edge browning, but generally speaking that's not bad at all, really. And you know, its rarity is literally just down to the print run. The book club itself was quite an interesting thing. So it started just after the war, when there was a massive demand for reading, and it was the brainchild of the guy who created Foyle's book chain. It's still going today. They've got a huge flagship store in London, and for a while it was called the Foyle's Book Club, then it was the Companion Book Club, and then it was the Reprint Society, and then it was just the normal book club, BCA, Book Club Associates, which was put together by a conglomerate of publishers to produce cheap book club editions. Certainly their heyday, I think, for book club editions was well, what we're looking at now, the mid-50s to perhaps the mid-60s. And there's some great stuff published in that time, and they're really not that expensive to collect. Obviously the Fleming ones are collectible, so they tend to go for more than your average book club. And apart from that, there are a few authors that you do want to pick up if you see them in book club form, because they are still collected. So Agatha Christie is one. There's about 20 Agatha Christies. George S. Simenon is another author. All the early Dick Francis books were published in book club form, and these books are themselves, nice copies are in the hundreds of pounds. So even a book club edition, you know, it's going to be worth like a tenner. And in a lot of cases you'll see piles and piles of book club editions at like 50p each. So next time you're in a charity shop or a thrift store or a jumble sale or somewhere where there's a lot of books and there's a stack of book club editions in the corner, don't discard them without taking a little look, just to see if any of those sort of classic 50s authors are in there, because they're still collectible today. I'm going a little bit further than that, into the 70s. The very earliest Stephen King novels in book club form are also well worth you picking them up. So you know, some of them can be in the hundreds of pounds. Say even the Book Club of Carrie, for example, by Stephen King, is an expensive book. So don't just rule them out. There is some money to be had in book club editions for sure. So I'm really going to town on this copy of Diamonds, because it's I'm not going to be getting another one, not unless I get very lucky. So I've cleaned it up as best I can. Another one which seems there's an ever such slight fading of the spine, but this is another one which, once again, the copies that I've seen tend to have very faded spines. It's difficult to know why that one's a little bit faded, considering it would have been in a wrapper, but it is. The boards are ever so slightly lighter than what's on the front and back. A tiny bit of spine roll, so it's probably been read a couple of times. It's slightly leaning to the right, but once again, once that's in a collection and it's stored properly, that's something that will sort itself out over time. So I'm not too worried about that. Yeah, there you go. Good stuff. Now we've got a non-Fleming one. It's the biography by John Pearson of Ian Fleming. This is the CBC, so it's the Companion Book Club. A pretty nice copy, this one, as I recall, but just a little bit of wear to it which needs sorting out. First of all, there's an old shop receipt, nothing to do with the book, and it's amazing what you find inside books that have been used as bookmarks Had a book recently as an old hardback from the 1940s, and out came a flattened pack of Woodbine cigarettes. So I've kept it because it's. I used to sell that sort of stuff on eBay, but cigarette memorabilia, I think they call it tobaccoania. I don't believe you can actually sell it on eBay anymore. So old cigarette boxes and things. So you can sell the cigarette cards, but you can't sell packets or stuff related to it, I don't think. So that will just remain as a curiosity. But one of the most common things you find generally is bus tickets and tube tickets if it's London. And I've got quite a little collection of those. Sometimes I have a clear out and stick them up in a little job lot on eBay. It's amazing what turns up inside things. That big collection I had in the summer when I finally got round to going through it, I had all sorts of stuff, flyers for Butlins from the 1950s, promotional advertising cards. I mean, just amazing. Unbelievable amount of bus tickets. It's just phenomenal. Very little in the way of bookmarks, ironically. So all I've done there was a slightly, you see I did cut the dust wrapper just to get a clean cut because it hadn't been done very cleanly, and that's what I tend to do with books where they've had a sticker, a price removed or something like that, and it's not been done very well. I just take my scissors to it and do a much cleaner cut. The boards are pretty good on this one, but because it's dark blue, it's shown every sort of little fingerprint and mark and bit of dust. Ever such a slight spine roll. You see I'm sort of pushing it back to make it square again. And then the top of this one had the inked blue top page edge. But it's a pretty sound copy that really, to me, doesn't look like it's even been read. It's got a little 20p in there, which is probably from the charity shop or the jumble sale or somewhere like that. And to be honest, you'll be able to find these. I mean, I probably paid maybe £8 to £10 for that copy of the biography because it's so nice. And I don't mind paying that at all because it's a really nice copy. But out in the wild, if you do get lucky, you'll find that for peanuts, I would think. Still a level of dust coming off the top, and it just shows sometimes that that level of dust can be invisible. You just can't even see it. But you know it's there, which is why even if a book looks mint, like this one, I'm still going to do it. Yeah, apart from that initial bit, there wasn't a lot else left to take off. Yeah, it's funny, under the lights that I've got, which are pretty powerful when I do filming, it does pick up all the little sort of fingerprints and marks on a dark board like that. And you see I'm constantly wiping the cardboard that I use as a base, and that's because you just can't believe how much dirt and grime comes off these sometimes. But that's a really nice one, that's so pleased with that one. Just that tiniest bit of spine roll, but that'll sort itself out on the shelf. Next, For Your Eyes Only. Very, very similar dust jacket design using the same colours, the gold, the black and the white. That was used on Goldfinger. This one's come from a dealer, so it's got a their dealer's wrap on it. Now, I don't mind dealers doing it, but I just prefer always my own plastic wrap, and you'll see me do a copy at the end where I protect the dust wrapper myself. I use a wrap. I put a link to it down below, but it's one that I just get off eBay, but you can get them on Amazon as well. And I think it really makes the dust wrappers pop. It's a little bit more work than a Brodart dust wrapper protector, but I think they look better. So, well, you can have a look later on. So this one's not bad, but you can see the spine there is ever so slightly dark compared to the white on the front. So it's got a little bit of spine yellowing, but not a lot. Certainly not a lot. A tiny bit of foxing in the creases there. The book itself, nice bright green boards on this one, although the spine has got a crease on the actual board. Not much I can do. Well, there is nothing I can do about that. There we are. It's got like a little 50p in there, which we're going to just rub out. I use a very soft Staedtler Artist's rubber. It's super soft rubber, and fantastic with pencil. They're only about £1. You should be able to get one of those in your local art shop. Last time I went in, I picked up a couple because they're so good. And I was just on my last cleaning video. My last rubber is right down to the last little bit now. So I've sent it to the rubber graveyard in the sky, and I haven't started using my new one again now. But you know, it lasts a year, maybe more, even with all the cleaning that I do. So when I'm rubbing the tops here, I am sort of pinching the book to keep it in a square position, because almost all of these have been read at some point, and they've got a bit of spine roll where it's not quite sitting dead square because it's been read a few times. Now you can sort that out, and some of the books are worse than others, but when I'm doing this, I'm pinching the book quite hard to keep it in situ. I don't want to push this dust into the book. I just want to wipe it off the top of the pages rather than sort of grime it in. But there we are, that's quite a nice one there, and just give it a couple more flick throughs, make sure I've not missed anything. Keep it nice and supple. There we are, it's the 5 short stories put into the one book. And yeah, nice wrapper, that one. I do like it. Obviously unique to the book club edition rather than the Cape original. Okay, so the only other non-Fleming one today is Colonel's Son by Robert Markham, aka Kingsley Amis. Now, the Cape edition of this is an absolute beauty. It's got that fantastic cover by Tom Adams, who one of his earlier works, but he of course went on to famously redesign all the Agatha Christie's for Fontana in the 70s and 80s, which are just, and late 60s in fact, and they're just fantastic. So do check those out. I've done a video of those on my channel. If you want a bit more Tom Adams. But this one there, so that's got a copy of the companion, which is like the monthly newsletter, and the receipt or invoice for the guy who originally signed up. This is a particularly nice copy. You can see the spine though, it's super white. The covers are all super white, but then a tiny little bit of browning to the spine, but it's so minuscule. It really is not too much of a concern at all. But I think it's a great addition, this one. And this period of the Companion Book Club should only set you back about £10 a book, if that. If you're patient, you can get them even cheaper than that. Speaking of the Cape Colonel's Son, I remember the first copy I got was in the early 90s. I was in New Zealand, a family holiday in New Zealand, out to see my gran. She'd emigrated out there back in the 70s, and she was getting on a bit. It was sort of the last chance to see her, really. So I went out with my mum and my sister to New Zealand, and we were out there for a month. Dad couldn't come because he was self-employed. He couldn't take it that much time off work, but I could. I was okay to do it. So I went out there, and I just remember I was only about 17 at the time, and I remember going into the bookshops back then. I was already a massive book collector, and that was the second-hand bookshops in New Zealand back in the early 90s were just full of it would be 2/3 hardbacks, and they would be British hardbacks that had been sent out to Australia and New Zealand, and then about 1/3 of it would be paperbacks, which they really frowned upon. Most of the second-hand book business back then, and we are talking 30 years ago now, was in hardbacks, and that's when I picked up my first copy of Colonel's Son, the Cape edition. Also remember picking up First If You Only Live Twice, which was like mint. And the best book I got while I was over there, I went to a house clearance, and it was like all books were 75 cents, which back then in British money was 25p. and I picked up a copy, and once again it looked pristine, of C.S. Forester's The African Queen from, I think, like 1933 in a dust wrapper. Beautiful, beautiful copy. Now, even back then, I actually did collect C.S. Forester, which is why I spotted it, but only the Hornblower books, not his other books. So I didn't keep it, and I brought it back to the UK. And when I showed it to a book dealer friend of mine, he offered me £75 for it, and it only cost me 25p. So I said, yeah, I'll take that and make a very quick profit, because he actually already had a customer lined up for it. He was an ex-brigadier from the army who was collecting rare first editions, and I don't know what he bought it for, a few £100, I think. But that particular book is £1,000 book now in that condition, maybe more. So I do sort of regret letting that one go. But then again, you know, it cost pennies and I made a great profit, so I can't complain. At the time it was the right thing to do, but I do sort of regret getting rid of that. Who knows, if I'd have had longer, who knows what else I might have been able to come up with. But certainly the 3 suitcases that we all had were all filled with stuff that I picked up on my travels over there. Right then, so now we've got Spy Love Me. Once again, this has got what they call a Brodart dust jacket popped onto it, where it's got like the paper which backs it. Not too bad. I mean, you know, it is what it is. I'm not a fan of those. I prefer the ones that I do, which you'll see in a minute. This one published by, though it's the book club, it's the logo is changing it to like the Reprint Society, a big R and an S. Not too bad. Got the sort of the snow scene there. A few that's got like a closed tear at the top there, right in the middle. But it doesn't look like it's a big rip, because that's why it's called closed, because it's all there. It's just it is just like where the cover has got ripped at some point. It's got a little bit of fingerprint markings on the back, and the really bad bit in the middle there I do just rub off, and then it's particularly bad at the top. But because the actual paper is a little bit weak around there, I didn't want to go over the top, so in the end I decided just to leave it, because if I wanted to clean that up properly I'd have to do the entire back cover, and I didn't really want to do that. I'd rather just leave it as is, else it would look a bit of a mess. A little bit of dust in the top edges of the dust wrapper, but that's normal. On the whole, not too bad. The blue boards again, fairly square copy. Looks like there's a tiny bit of spine roll on that one, but not much. Fairly clean copy as well by the looks of it. Do that top edge again. So the more astute you'll notice is that I've actually put 2 versions of this video out, and I have done this a couple of times in the past now. So a proportion of my audience actually really enjoy not me whittering on about what I'm actually doing, but they just enjoy the sounds of me cleaning books, and they know what to sort of expect. So I've done a version with me just cleaning the books, and then the version that you're listening to now and watching now, where I've got that original narration free version and I'm just explaining what I'm doing with the voiceover. Want to try and keep everybody happy, but hopefully you are watching the version that you would like to hear or watch. So I mentioned earlier I'd joined the James Bond sort of book collecting Facebook group, and there's some amazing stuff on there. And I've got to admit, it does make me want to sort of perhaps track down the Cape editions, but they are so expensive these days to get the firsts. This is nice. I really like this edition of You Only Live Twice. It's got that really vibrant jacket, which I think is so in keeping with the book. Don't get me wrong, I love the Richard Chopping original, but I think this one's also really good. This is another one I've had since I was a kid. See a little bit of darkening at the very, very top and the spine, but on the whole, out of copies that you see, that's a pretty bright yellow, and that's what you're looking for on this one. Good book this, remember enjoying it last time I read it. Not too bad condition, this one. Looks like a touch of foxing there. So yeah, so I've been enjoying this this Facebook group, and I have started sharing some of my James Bond related paperback collection, which I'm in the process of trying to. I've basically, what I've done with my Pan books, I pulled out all my vintage Bond books, and there's various editions, and the sort of Fleming and Fleming related stuff like Thrilling Cities and the Diamond Smugglers, the Colonel's Son, the later film editions. I've pulled them all out, and I'm going to put them all together sort of in their own section within my Pan book collection. And I've sort of replicated some original Pan books POS, plus I've got some original stuff myself, and I've dotted that around. Put a couple of books in the 60s standees, and they look great. I'm certainly going to do a bit more of that going forward, and I've shared the photos on the Facebook group, and they've gone down really well. So that's a work in progress. I am going to revisit the Bond paperbacks in much more detail now I know a bit more about them, because at the moment all I've got up there is a video showing the first Pan editions of the set, and there's so much more to it than that, particularly with the different reprints and the different jackets. So I'm honestly not sure which way to do it, whether I should just do it by title, so I don't know, the 8 to 12 editions of Casino Royale, or probably what I think would be best is sort of doing it by the different series and what was released in those series. So like you've got those sort of the Still Life series, for example, so I could do a video on those once I've got them all. The ones with the white covers, for example, a little bit later. I have done a separate video on the movie editions, the movie tie-ins, but there's a lot of scope there. So we'll have to have a look, but certainly more videos to come on the original Pan best-selling Bond books. I remember when I used to work in the book business, which I did for quite a long time, 15 plus years, plus I had my own shop. One of the book reps who worked for Random House at the time, when he first started repping in the early 70s, it was for Pan books, and he gave me, when they were training, when he, his part of his initiation, as it were, they gave him some photocopies of old Pan book order forms that were given in bookshops. And even though it was only a photocopy, I have still got it in my collection, so I'm going to dig that out. But it would show a list of all the Pan books for, say, well, I remember one in particular. It was when Dr. No, the Pan movie time was released. So for that month, all the Pan books around it in this particular bookshop, they'd order like 1 or 2 copies. Then it would get to Dr. No, and it would be 100 or 200, and then the complete Fleming backlist would be like 10 of each. So, and then the rest of the Pan list would be 1s or 2s again. So that would just sort of give you an idea of the popularity and how many people have said that Ian Fleming certainly helped Pan become the big publisher that it did become. It wasn't just Fleming, they did have other massive hits, and their Second World War memoirs, some of those were fantastic, such as The Dam Busters and The Colditz Story. They're books that sold a lot of copies, so they also obviously helped. But Fleming's contribution to Pan's success cannot be overlooked. This is perhaps I think it's probably my favourite edition out of all the book clubs. I really like it. I mean, I know there's very little difference to the regular Cape edition. I believe the actual dust wrapper is, once again, it's much thicker than a normal Cape one, so it's more robust. So this one's actually survived relatively intact but faded, so it has got that faded of the brown there. But honestly, the rest of it's so nice, I'm not too worried about that. This is a tough book to find in nice condition again, because of its dark cover. Any little rips and tears and chips show up and make it look worse than perhaps it is. Yellow boards, they're sort of a mustard coloured boards, susceptible to fingerprints, and in fact I've actually just got my rubber there just to rub out a couple of fingerprints on it. But once again, as long as you do it, you know, with a nice soft rubber and just do it nice and gently, nothing to worry about there. It's not going to damage the boards at all. There we are. This one's got a little bit of page edge foxing. Looks like a bit of writing inside there, a bit of pencil. I might need to rub that out in a sec. Yeah, so a little bit of foxing on it, but nothing too serious. Yeah, it looks like it's got an old price inside. A bit of a weird place to put it on the inside back cover, but there you go. And a book like Dr. No, in that sort of condition, is, you're probably still looking, unless you get lucky, at 50 quid for that one. But when you think the original Cape edition in a first edition, you know, it's probably upwards of 1,000 plus. It's peanuts, really. There we are, quite a bit of dust on the top of that one. I have had people on the channel with the page edge foxing. They've said, well, why don't you just use some light sandpaper? But I'm not really a fan. I might experiment with something not very expensive, you know, not valuable, just as an experiment, just to see how I get on. And use sandpaper to see if it is a process that potentially could work, because I do have some books which have got like a tiny spot, and if I could just get that one spot off, it would really make a difference. But for a book which is like all the edges have got spots on, I don't know if I'd want to do it for all of that, you know. But generally speaking, a copy of Dr. No, I'm very happy with that one. That'll do. Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah. Probably been read a couple of times, but that's it. Now we've got my original copy of On Her Majesty's. Now this one has got a ripped spine down the bottom, so I probably will upgrade it, because this is one of the later ones and it's easy to get. Copies don't really go for much more than about a tenner. But as you can see down the bottom there, the spine's all there, but it has got like a little water ripple, like a stain of some sort. But the actual, so I could have just popped a little bit of tape in on the inside dust jacket just to keep it in place, but I've decided against that, because once this one's in a protective plastic dust wrapper, it won't look quite nice. But it is one, along with Live and Let Die, which we'll see in a minute, that is definitely on my little list of books to upgrade to a better copy. Not too bad a jacket, obviously relating to all the ski chases and the alpine environment of the story, but not the greatest jacket, that one. But it is an original and different to the Cape. Very light blue boards on this one. Almost looks like a pelican, old pelican book, doesn't it? Very light. light blue like that. And I remember picking up the handful of book club hardbacks I had, literally, I think I was a kid. I got into the Bond books through my dad. He had, when I inherited his book collection, he would, there was a nice wedge of all the Fleming books in there. That's when I first read Casino Royale, but he had them right up to some of the spin-off stuff. He had the Robert Markham, he had the For Bond Lovers Only book, which I absolutely loved, although his copy was, you know, notorious for that one with the photo insert in paperback. It was falling to bits. Some of the other stuff. And when I got my mum's books, she had a load of Pan Agatha Christie's. So inadvertently, I had like an instant Pan collection from my parents. It's ironic that this last Christmas just gone, I gave Dad back a set of like the C.S. Foresters, which he set me on to the Hornblower books because he didn't actually own them. So I got him the 3 omnibus editions in paperback, which are dirt cheap secondhand on online, and you got the entire saga then, which is a nice easy way to read them. But yeah, it was my dad's copy of Casino Royale that I read back in the day, and I did go through and read all the Bond books in order. I loved Casino Royale. I still think it's one of my favourite Bonds, but I do also have fond memories of them all. They've all got sort of bits that stick in your mind, and it's interesting to see that elements of it were reused later on in later Bond movies, such as, you know, isn't it like Felix, or one of the characters in Live and Let Die, gets his leg bitten off by an alligator, which comes back in the movie License Renewed. So little bits like that I find really interesting. Now, this is that first book club. This was the very first one that was released, and it's in sort of a dust jacket, which was, you know, typical of the book club editions of that time, which was more like almost like a bit like a chessboard. It's not great, as you can see. So Live and Let Die is one of those ones. It's super common. There's a lot of copies out there. You can go online at any time and have your pick of about 15. But try finding one with a nice white spine. That's really difficult. So I was literally just last week, I put in a bid on one on eBay for maybe 15, 16 quid, and I got outbid. I should have put in something more like akin to 30, just to get a really nice one to finish this set off, because this copy here, I paid like 5-6 quid for it when I wasn't, you know, I just sort of wanted to get a copy, and I do regret it now, because although it's complete, it's just not that great a copy. And compared to the other ones I've got, it's awful. So as you can see, it's stained. It's not been kept in it's obviously been kept in a damp environment, so it's not that nice. It's got the sort of the more upper class boards, shall we say. So some of the book club editions had 2 versions. They had like a version which, although it came in a wrapper, it was almost like a mock leather binding, which is what this one's got, rather than cloth. I'm not going to go into trying to fix up or collect all the different variants. There's just too many, and I haven't got the space for it. But interesting none the same to know that there are variants of certain editions. But yeah, I give this one a bit of a clean, but it's not staying. I'm still actively looking for a nice white one with a nice white spine, and the one will turn up in time. It's just patience is a virtue, and that's the case with these. As I said, I managed to fill in all the gaps in my collection within about 3-4 months without too much trouble in the end. But just keep your eyes peeled for a nice one of this, and a half decent Diamonds Are Forever, and the rest of them are out there, depending on how fussy you are condition wise and what you would like to pay. But you can definitely get a set of these together. There we are. So there's not much else I can do with that one. It is what it is. Nice to actually have a picture of Fleming inside there. I don't think he's in any of the other ones. Cool portrait shot of him. Then the very last one, I think this is the last one, is the James Bond omnibuses from the early 70s. This was a BCA, so it's a Book Club Associates one. And I remember having this one. I seem to remember it came out in about 73, something like that. It's unforgettable because of that striking dust jacket. There are later omnibus editions. There was a couple in the UK by St. Michael, which came out early 80s, I think. There was a big run of them, St. Michael, but published by Octopus. And then in the 90s, there were very nice editions, like an Ian Fleming quartet or a quintet. 3 volumes of those to do the whole books in hardback omnibus. But this was the original one. I believe it's the first ever Fleming omnibus. And got that really amazing sort of silver embossed jacket. Really, really something, that one. I've never been much of a fan of reading books in omnibuses, at least certainly not in recent years. I'd much prefer to read the standalone book. I think the biggest omnibus I ever got through was the Lord of the Rings omnibus, which is a beast. There we are. Not much to do inside that one, it all looks fine. Live and Let Die, Diamonds Are Forever, and Dr. No. Still over the top a little brush there. Doesn't look too bad. Although you can see, if you look at the right hand side and then you look at the left hand side, you can see the level of dust that's come off that. Interesting, isn't it? As you can see, it was there, even though it wasn't exactly standing out a mile, but it was there. Not too bad on the bottom, of course, because most of these books have been stood up the right way on a bookcase, but you never know. There we are. Lovely. So that's all the books cleaned, and now it's the methodical process of going through and actually wrapping each one. Now I only show one of these because this process took another hour to wrap them all up, and I actually ran out of plastic wrap 2 books from the end, or 2 or 3 books from the end, so I didn't wrap them all anyway. But I'm only going to show you the one here, and that is going to be that really nice copy of Dr. No. So I'll just show you how the process I use to protect the dust wrapper. So apologies for my arm getting in the way, but it's quite difficult to film this. This is why I need a dedicated studio, which is on the way. I'm hoping to get one built this year in the garden, so we'll see. But until that time, this is as best as I can do. So what I've done, I've got the plastic wrap, and I've just unrolled a bit of it, and then I've got the dust wrapper in place. So I don't want too much excess waste, so I've left about half an inch or a centimetre or so from the right end there. And then I'm using my scissors. I'm going to cut off a piece there so that I've got just one piece of plastic to use from, and then I can put the roll to one side. But this is basically, first of all, just getting a bit of plastic which is approximately the right size that I need. And I have done a couple of dedicated videos where I show you, where I cover some of my sort of rarer first editions which are in dust wrappers. So do check those out on the channel if you want to. Just search under my channel and dust wrappers and you'll find them, where I do a few at a time. So now that I've got the rough size, I'll flip it round, put my weights back again. I said, because these dust wrappers are actually slightly thicker paper or card than perhaps a regular dust wrapper on the whole, they're quite easy to work with. And this particular one, this copy of Dr. No, it's a nice copy. The wrapper is pretty good apart from that faded spine, so it's not like it's got any awkward edges that are going to need extra protection. So what I do initially then, I just so give it that first fold, then I grab my old wooden ruler. Now that wooden ruler is a couple of millimeters thick. So what that simulates, if you fold against that ruler, it introduces like a couple of millimeters or so, which is equivalent to the actual thickness of the boards of the book. So you're not looking for a dead crease per se, you're looking for something which is, it's got like that little bit of leeway there. So I use this old wooden ruler, and that sort of simulates the edge of the boards, and that seems to work really well. And then once that's in place, then I'll just push it down as much as possible. As you can see there, it just doesn't take a lot of work, but it does the trick. Does the trick. There we are. So that's the first edge done. Then I'll flip it round. And I'm just pushing the dust wrappers right up against the edge of the crease that we've just made. I'll pop my weights back on to keep it in place. And I just need to fold up the bottom side now. So I use exactly the same technique. Nice and flat. See, if I was doing this with the Goldfinger wrapper, that ruler would cover all the jagged edges on that wrapper, so I could fold over, knowing I'm not going to make it any more damaged. But it's a really straightforward process, and you know, one of those rolls costs about a tenner, and they last for ages. I've probably been able to do about 50 books with that, which I think is a veritable that's a veritable deal. And not too bad value for money. There we are. So I've just put my final little bits on. I'm almost ready to just grab the book now and pop that in. So in summary then, I do really hope you found this little cleaning video useful. I hope it's inspired you to go and clean your own vintage James Bond books, or maybe inspired you to get your own collection of vintage James Bond book clubs together yourself, because as I said, it's not that expensive, particularly when you think of the price of the original Cape hardbacks. In comparison, it just doesn't compare, and you can certainly get a set of these with a little bit of patience together very, very easily. So the last thing I need to do then, just to finish this one off, is to wrap the book back in. So make sure I've got it round the right way. Grab my cleaned copy of the Dr. No hardback. Let me just slip this one in, and once the wrapper's on, I usually leave them with a weight on for about 1 week, and that gets all the air out and it makes sure that the creases are definitely in place on the plastic wrap, and then the books are ready to go on the shelf, and that's exactly what I've done, and they do look fantastic. So look out for a video on these book club editions in much more detail in about a month or so's time. But there we are, there is Dr. No, and doesn't it look blooming great? So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed that first look at these James Bond book club editions. Now that they're all clean, I'm ready to go into them in a lot more detail. So in a future video, in about a month or so's time, I'll go through, we'll go through the printing runs, who did the cover art, which ones are rare, which ones I found scarce and harder to get hold of, and basically just appreciate them for what they actually are, which is a fantastic little run to get together, and thankfully not too expensive. If you have enjoyed today's video, do please give it the thumbs up. Don't forget, I do have some other James Bond related videos on the channel, and there is a dedicated playlist which will be linked at the end, so you can watch some of the other James Bond related videos that I have. Thank you very much for watching today, and I shall look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.